Hey everybody, I'm back. I'm actually doing this lesson on the same day I did the lesson before this one. So if you're thinking, she didn't change her shirt, well, it's because it's the same day. I promise that even though we're staying at home, I change my clothes every day, which is nice for everybody, I guess. Okay, enough about that. Today we're going to be talking again about poetry and why it's important to read poems more than once. Today's learning target, I can examine how the use of figurative language affects the poem's meaning. If you remember, we talked about figurative language before, and we talked about how poems are made really much more interesting with the use of figurative language. And we talked about how different similes and metaphors and figures of speech add to the poem's depth and really help the reader visualize what the author had in mind. Here it says, we're going to read a poem out loud, and it says read it at least 2 times, maybe more. The poem that we're reading today is called Mother to Son. Hello? So I am going to get the Poetry Foundation up here, Poetry Foundation website. So we're going to be reading another poem by Langston Hughes. And I believe that we've read other poems by Langston Hughes in the past, maybe last week, and you can find some of his poetry on commonlit.org. Langston Hughes is one of my favorite poets, and a little bit about his background. He was an African American poet, and I think that you can really hear his voice in the poems that he writes. And when I say voice, I mean what he's really thinking inside. All right. Mother to Son by Langston Hughes. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I've been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I'm still going, honey. I'm still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Okay, a couple notes I had about the wording that Hughes uses. This word stair, right here, stair meaning like a staircase, like when you climb up the stairs. So when I first read this, I was trying to visualize a crystal stair. And I definitely have never seen a staircase made out of crystal. But I think crystal is something that's very precious. And what came to mind is that scene in Cinderella, the cartoon movie, the animated movie, when Cinderella is running down that staircase at the palace and she drops her glass slipper. And it's this beautiful white staircase, and I assume it's made of marble. So even though I've never seen a crystal staircase, I know what Langston Hughes means is that it's a beautiful staircase and it's just very formal and for rich people, for the very, very rich, the very wealthy. And I imagine climbing up a crystal staircase is just for rich people who are living this blessed life. But what the mother says in this poem is her life has not been a crystal stair. It's not been a blessed life. It's been rough. And that reminds me of a place where I used to live when I was a little girl. And the porch steps were made out of wood, and some of the pieces of wood were coming up and the nails were missing and the wood had warped. So when you step on it, you had to be careful because it would go up and down. And there were lots of splinters in those stairs. I remember that I was always afraid that an animal would reach for me from underneath the staircase because it was an open staircase, and I was always afraid that a little hand would come out and get me. So I'm going to read this again, and I want you to think about what the mother is trying to say to the son about the staircase. And what does the staircase really mean? Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on the steps 'cause you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Now let me stop sharing this screen and let's go back to the original slides. Let's see. Let's see here. My question is, what do you notice about the poem and about the word choice? Think about it, and I'll link the poem. I'll put the poem on our Google Classroom so you can read it again. I want you to think about, what does the poet's word choice tell us about the mother and help us understand the mother? How does she feel about her son? How does she feel about her life and the son's life? So I'm going to put this on our Google Classroom, and you can read it again and think about word choice. All right, I will see you tomorrow.